President Trump talking about everything from the economy to trade talks in a speech at the Economic Club of New York today. We're joined on set by Eamon Javers to bring us all of the highlights. Eamon, welcome.
So nice to be
the NASDAQ.
Unbelievable. I mean, you guys get to work inside, so this is great. It's nice to be in out of the weather. It was cold out on 6th Avenue today.
I can only imagine.
Look, this was a big economic set piece for the president. Everyone expected, he's going to make some kind of major announcement. He's going to say something about China, USMCA, where are we going? And in the end, he didn't say anything that was major news. We were thinking maybe we might get a new date for the China deal, maybe a location for the China signing. He didn't do any of that, but he did suggest that that deal is coming. Here's what he said.
We're the ones that are deciding whether or not we want to make a deal. We're close. A significant phase one trade deal with China could happen soon. But we will only accept a deal if it's good for the United States and our workers and our great companies.
So the president saying it could happen soon is about as close as we got, Melissa, to the idea that we're going to pin down any specifics on the China trade deal. He also said that he wants negative interest rates in the United States. Says that happens in other countries. He said the Federal Reserve is blocking him from getting that. He wants the Federal Reserve to get out of the way and unleash the power of this economy. You guys know more than I do about what negative interest rates would look like in this country and what the impact of that would be. But the president is convinced that's the right way to go and was pushing for it today.
Yeah, he said something like, give me some of that.
Yeah, give me that money.
When it
give me that money.
Negative interest rates.
Right.
Amy, when you piece together what the president said with what Larry Kudlow said on the closing bell earlier today, it sounds almost like the December 15th tariffs could, in fact, come into play if they can, because Kudlow basically said there will be no movement on tariffs unless a deal is signed. And
that's been the baseline assumption all along. But I think what you heard today is the president suggesting that there is a possibility we don't get a deal. Remember, he announced this deal back in October as having been completed. Well, it looks like it's not as completed as maybe we thought in October when the president was in the Oval Office with the Chinese delegation. Now, the president talking in a way about the possibility that we don't have a deal at all. And we'll see whether we can get there. But he's sort of teasing this possibility that we're close, but he's been doing that a lot. And we never seem to get all the way there.
As a strategy, doesn't he sort of have to say, look, if we don't get to a deal, we're going to go forward with that, right? That's sort of the stick out there.
If you're going to have the stick, you've got the carrot. You got to be prepared to use the stick, right? And this is a president who's in a situation politically now. I mean, impeachment is looming. We're going to have this major public hearing tomorrow, which is going to be the news of the day in Washington. But he's also got an election cycle coming up in 20. The president's going to need a win at some point. And so the political calculus, I think, for the president is different than it is for Xi Jinping, who's president for life in Beijing and has the longest time horizon of any leader on planet Earth. This president needs to do something, you would think, before next year. I don't think he can go into the election. I don't think he wants to go into the election having not gotten some kind of trade deal here.
So, Eamon, this morning, Jim Cramer said something. He's like, are we going to get Trump channeling Mnuchin, or are we going to get Trump channeling Navarro? And do you think that, did it lean one way or the other? Because listening to Larry Kudlow in the closing bell, I don't think Larry knew what Trump was channeling. It just seemed like a whole lot of nothing today.
It was a lot. You know what this reminded me the most of? We go out to these departures at the White House all the time on the South Lawn. The president, you hear Marine One in the background, the helicopters whirling, the president talks. These were a lot of the same points today that the president makes at those South Lawn departures all the time. A lot of this, almost word for word, the rhetoric is rhetoric that we've heard before from the president. So I don't know if it was more Mnuchin or more Navarro. I mean, ultimately, he sort of split the difference and ended up more or less nowhere. I mean, some of the tough on Beijing rhetoric that we've heard before, some of the signs of a deal coming that we've heard before, but ultimately no real progress in terms of any enlightenment on where this is going to land.
Lori, from your standpoint, I'm curious, if the president keeps doing this, is this enough to keep markets at record highs, basically?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've been enjoying the fruits of whatever's coming out later this year. I think we've been trading on that since August. I mean, you mentioned the idea that, Trump needs a win at some point going into election year. I've literally been hearing that from investors since the end of August. And my question to investors and to you as well is, if he needs a win, why haven't we gotten one by now?
Well, the question is, when does he need to win, right? I mean, ultimately, the timing of this, I think, matters. And impeachment complicates that a little bit because it could change his time horizon. But you might think the president's looking at the electoral calendar. You've got Iowa, New Hampshire coming up in February. The president might want to counter-program that. And, you have something in your back pocket that you can take out and really smash the news cycle with. That might be an opportunity for that if it's ready to go behind the scenes. And we just don't know whether it's ready to go behind the scenes. response.
And I guess my second question is, when we do get this phase one deal, what's actually going to be in it, and will it be anything that will actually restore business confidence? We've seen such a deterioration in business confidence. Some measures are down around recession lows. Is phase one deal going to fix that?
Well, we have no idea, because I've been asking the White House the same question that you just asked, which is the president announced the phase one deal in October in the Oval Office, and immediately I went into the press office and said, great, give me the paper. You know, what are the bullet points? You know, where are some paragraphs with writing that show us what's in this deal? Yeah. And there was nothing. They offered us nothing in writing about what was in that deal. The Chinese essentially never agreed that there even was a deal on the phase one deal. So, you know, where does that leave you? Maybe there was a deal, maybe there wasn't a deal. There was some kind of announcement, and now we're still negotiating the same deal. So what's going to be in it? Who knows? It's clear, though, that they've punted the hardest stuff into phase two and phase three whenever those are coming. But all the stuff about intellectual property, all the stuff about cyber theft and you know, corporate theft of major corporate secrets, all that stuff is not going to be in phase one. That's going to be in the harder phase two, phase three, and it's not clear what the timeline for that is.
You know what the most important quarter for GDP is in a presidential election cycle? Q2 of that year of the election.
That's when it's baked in.
That's
mentally?
when that's the Q2. Supposedly you want like a blowout Q2 number in order to sway people's hearts and minds. So if that's the case, you get a deal in Q1.
Right.
You sort of unleash whatever is going to be unleashed on the economy in theory. Hits Q2.
Well, I mean, it sets up for it, because GDP went from north of 3% in the first quarter. It's going to be around 1% in the next quarter. I mean, it's trending the wrong way. So he can talk about the greatest economy in the history of mankind all he wants. I think at a certain point you're confusing the economy with the market. And I think what we're learning, if nothing else, the two have never been wider apart.
At some point, politically, it's about how you feel, right? The old political joke is, what's the difference between a recession and a depression? A recession is when your brother-in-law's out of work. A depression is when you're out of work, right? Yeah. And how people feel, how they experience the economy, multiplied by 350 million, is sort of where the politics of this will shake out next year. And we just don't know where that's going to be yet.
Eamon, thank you. Great to
Thanks
see you
for
in
having
person.
me. This is great. I appreciate it.
Eamon Javers, come on inside anytime you want.